So hello and welcome to you all for our fourth Fika with Friends webinar. And as I just mentioned, I'm Romy. Some of you may know me. I'm the Commercial Director at Vestra here in the UK. And today we're discussing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 12, which is responsible consumption and production, with a particular focus on engineering. And with us today are Wayne Grills, CEO of Barley, and Alistair Bayford. Oops, sorry, Wayne, you carry on. Yeah.
So I'll just say good morning.
Yeah, sorry. And Alistair Bayford, who's Commercial Director at I D Verde. And we're looking forward to a really interesting conversation about value engineering, which is, as I think probably most of the people here today know, quite a thorny topic in our sector. But we're determined to find the positives. We're all convinced there are some, and hopefully you'll join us in that conversation. So we'll get started. There won't be any presentations today. We're just going to run this as a conversational webinar where we have 4 key questions that we're going to debate around. For each of those questions, we'll be seeking Wayne and Alistair's views, and also there are polls which will allow a bit of a break, and then we'll have opportunities for you to ask some questions and for us to answer those. Do keep an eye on the chat. Do drop questions in there. My colleagues Matt and Jack in the background will be dropping in links where appropriate. So just keep an eye on that, and please let us know if there's any more information that you need. So moving on to the first area that we wanted to discuss, it's really about the definition of value engineering. We wanted to talk about that, what it's supposed to be, why it's carried out, what the outcome should be, where is the value, and actually, are we being responsible in this? It's hard to say when you sort of are at the supplier end, I think, but we do all have a responsibility. And we really do need to sort of look at the areas in which we can all get involved and act responsibly and sustainably, because the focus of today is really very much on sustainability and the value engineering that we carry out. Does it really have a positive impact? So there's just a few well, I think these were from Wikipedia and such places that I Googled. So there are a few definitions of value engineering that might help. I'm sure you all know what it is, but this is what it's supposed to be. So I wonder if Wayne, you would just give us your version of events and how you see it in the industry. And we are talking specifically about landscape contracting and design.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. So good morning, everybody. And I think from my perspective, I was thinking because I've got some definitions that very much reflect what you've got up on screen just now. But for me, it's value engineering equals common sense. It has to be a common sense approach. It has to involve everybody in the contract process. And it should be a process, therefore, of optimizing the value of a project. So without reducing, if you like, the effectiveness of the project deliverables, so to speak. So I think for me, put in place in the right way with the right agreements, the right people doing the right job for value engineering, it can be done very positively. So yeah, I think, we will get a little bit more into some of the realities of that as we move through. But I think overall, the ideal outcome of value engineering is a project which suffers no material change for the client ultimately, or loss of profit for the contractor, but a programme that's been rationalised and scrutinised also by the contractor. I think perhaps we'll tap into that a little bit more as we go through in terms of the role that the contractor can play in this process.
No, I think that's a really good point. And we have primed a contractor who can give us their view, if you would, Alistair, just on how you see this panning out and where you see the positives.
Of course. Good morning, all listeners. I think from my perspective, completely agree with what Wayne's just said. I won't kind of repeat him verbatim, but our issue, our biggest contributor in this kind of to this term is time, or timing of value engineering, and often it's usually isolated to cost. So trying to find cost improvements or reducing the value of a project, essentially to provide cost savings to the client or the project. and we're often left feeling that we haven't got enough time, or it's too late in the process, and decisions, key decisions actually, have already been made. And if I just throw a statistic at you, I've looked at our spend on projects in London over the past 3 years. Broadly speaking, materials and nominated subcontractors represents 33 to 40% of cost, 60% of which are already nominated before we see the tender pack. And whilst they're equal or approved, there is a degree of certainty that the client will proceed with that specified product or service, leaving the ability to value engineer at that point almost irrelevant, because those decisions have been made and there's very much little wiggle room to propose anything else.
And so you see that or similar approved actually not coming to bear so often? Because I think from a supplier's point of view, often we think that's the sort of gateway, that's the loophole, and it's then all cards are on the table, you know. But you don't see it that way. You see it as actually quite protectionist.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're to submit a compliant bid, then technically we're going with the nomination. We find we just don't have time to put forward the equal or approved. And if we do, it comes with limited opportunity to see that through. So if you've got a 12-week long project with 8-week supply chain lead times, 4-week mobilisation, your project's over before you've had a chance to put those suggestions forward and work them through that kind of iterative process of the design decisions made, the decisions for long-term management and maintenance. Those are all things that are decided upon in those silos before we see the tender documentation.
Which I suppose, I mean, you're a landscape architect, so am I, which I suppose is music to most landscape architects' ears, to be fair. You know, it depends on the perspective, doesn't it? I was just going to launch this first poll, I think, which is about the positives and negatives. If you want to take a look at this and take part. So the first point really is, do you currently feel all parties see a positive result from VE, which is about value and not just cost? So please do start to take part in that. Everybody should be able to see that and start filling it out. I'm just starting to see those coming in now. And then secondly, what percentage of schemes benefit from a value engineered approach? So you can see, yes, nobody's sitting on the fence, which is a good thing, I think, in these. But not entirely positive results there, are they? We need a few more to come in if we can. I think there are more out there. 5 of you still to vote if you could. It's making a difference. Apart from the positive outcome, I think it's not particularly. No, okay, I think we'll close that one there then. So, yeah, fairly negative responses, I think, then. So hopefully we can start to redress that today and bring in some other aspects that might start to shift people's views. And what percentage of schemes? Again, very few. So that's, I guess, in line with what you've just been saying, Alistair, and not so sort of widely known. So you can see those results there. Okay.
That's really interesting. Really interesting. And I wonder why that is, because I feel that might be a view that it is cost related and that you're getting a lower value product as a result.
I feel like that's the common belief.
Yeah, so perhaps there's bad experiences, really.
No, exactly. And I think, you know, that's why it's important to talk to you today, because there are other experiences and hopefully we can turn those around. So yeah, thank you for those of you that did vote on that. That's really interesting. Do put any questions you have in the Q&A, and we will stop at various points, as I said, to get into the detail of those. But if we move on to the next thought that we wanted to discuss, which is the challenges that we all face. And I think we do all individually have completely different challenges, as you know, whether we're a supplier or a designer, or you referred to them just now, Alistair, particularly the time pressures. And if you're getting into liquidated damages. You've also mentioned insurance and risk in the past when we've talked, whether there's an opportunity to bring in local procurement, which is so often desirable, and how you get around that with nominated suppliers. So I don't know if you want to pick that up again, and then we'll go back to Wayne for a broader view of all of those points.
I mean, there's probably two categories really: risk or risk transfer. So we often find that, largely speaking, most contracts now have a contractor's design portion. We always find that quite challenging because, despite having the responsibility, either the decisions are already made or the decisions are still wanted to be made by the client team, quite rightly. So we feel that in some ways that control isn't necessarily transferred entirely, but we are left picking up the risk in the long term. Time pressures, I mentioned that previously, very short lead times, win the job on the Friday, turn up onto site on the Monday. And we are dealing with a supply chain that, lead times are anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks. And on short projects, you just don't get the time to procure or even suggest value as a result of the buildability review. Mm-hmm. And then local procurement, huge objective under the Social Value Act to increase local spend. I'm not going to name the project, but a recent project, 10% of our spend was local. Of that 10%, so just over £300,000, £280,000 was what you would expect, aggregates and materials off site. Every other material, so the paving, the furniture, the play equipment, the plants, the trees, all nominated, and all outside of what you would consider to be local. So in a London project, furthest specified material was obviously China for stone, and then we've got a broad range of manufacturers, UK based manufacturers, but still not local, and no ability to change that really.
No, that's difficult. And I know, Wayne, you've been speaking to some of your members, and I guess a lot of what they've been saying aligns with Alistair's points, but have you got more challenges that you're aware of, particularly from the contractor's point of view?
Yeah, I think there's a whole host, isn't there? I think, whilst we want to look at this as a positive situation, many of the contractors that we spoke to have seen some downsides to value engineering, to say the least. So I think, sort of half the contractors we spoke to had some bad experiences of value engineering, where, as we've already said, it was just treated as nothing other than a cost-cutting exercise, for example. But principally, it's been, in their experience anyway, it's been the main contractors and quantity surveyors, to a lesser extent, the clients that have been value engineering. So obviously, as Alistair says, winning a job and being on site the following week really doesn't allow an awful lot of time. Time's a huge constraint when we're looking at these kind of situations. And as he's already pointed out, to be able to then look at other supply chains and be able to get those in, proving the quality that people are looking for, but possibly at a lesser cost, or is there another material out there that suffices the needs? So I think one of the examples we were given was some stainless steel balustrade, in which originally it had been specified for a 316 grade marine specification, and I think contractors were saying, look, for what you're going to use it for, and I think it was in a domestic environment from memory, a 304 grade will be absolutely sufficient for those needs. And actually, so therefore you can reduce the cost with no damage made to the client, the product that they've got, how it looks, how it appears, all of those kind of things. I think many of the contractors believe that specification changes again occur without the knowledge of the client. And on some occasions, not always, but on some occasions, we'll get to the sticky points, I think, that these have been done, even without the knowledge of the contractor. So the contractor's then picking up the pieces on site, so to speak, not knowing that these changes have taken place. Orders being delivered, that sort of thing can then result in incorrect specification of products and supply. You know, supply of cheaper soils without the client knowing, reducing depths of soil and substrates, all of those kind of things that we all know and love, so to speak, all play a part. But I think, you know, that's the role of the contractor to try and get that right, which is a really difficult job to do when you're so far down in the project, particularly I think when funds can be short.
I think it's interesting. I mean, as you know, going back way back, sort of 25 years or so ago, when I was out on site as a landscape architect and sometimes in sort of clerk of works roles, and I'm not sure they even exist anymore. I don't know really of very many people that are doing that anymore. And the defense is always from a designer's point of view that, you know, that they equally have challenges and time pressures, and you're never given enough time or fees to, you know, to do any further investigation. And I think a lot of this is this sort of shifting blame that just circles around. You know, as you said, it might be the client's fault because they made decisions and other people weren't made aware. I mean, there's this constant kind of cycle, isn't there, of everybody feeling a bit hard done by.
There is, and I think one thing that I would say, Romy, is I'm not trying to apportion blame by any stretch of imagination. No. This is some of the feedback we've received, but I think likewise, you know, we've even spoke to one contractor who suggested that value engineering encouraged a scenario where contractors were competing with each other. So, you know, clients, etc., were going back to various contractors and saying, well, if you were doing this job, what would you put in there and how much would that cost? And that in itself has contractors competing with each other, which again is not a great thing either. So I think, yeah, it's not a great scenario to be in. And I think for me, I don't want to necessarily get to the solution too early in the session, but for me, it's about all of those parties working together from day one, bringing the contractors, the designers, the specifiers, etc., all together, you know, whether it be a virtual room or in one room, you know, at the very front end of the project, and get that input, which is so crucial at that very front end, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I think we'll come to the, you know, how can we make better decisions towards the end of the conversation. But it is another thing that slightly depresses me that sort of 25 years on, I don't see that much has changed, you know, and we were having conversations about exactly that, you know, working more closely, bringing suppliers in earlier, you know, all these things. And we seem to all sort of know. So we've got to find something later that will make a difference, I think, and maybe have a chat around that in a bit more detail. We've got another poll, which seems like a good point to do this. So the next poll is on value engineering. Oh, hang on a second. Sorry, no, that's the first one. Sorry, I need to go on to the second question.
You could see whether opinions changed. In the last,
yeah, maybe we should run them all at the end. Yes, that's a good idea, and see if we've managed to shift anybody. So yeah, so these are the challenges, and if you'd fill this in, so what do you think is the biggest challenge personally? And this is multiple choice, so it doesn't just have to be one choice, so it might be all of them. Oh, we're straight in there. So you can't see this, can you? No, it's on my sharing screen.
We can see the question, but we can't see the...
Yeah, no, sorry. So I'm sort of giving you this running feedback because it looks like you should see it. It's on my shared screen, but I will just keep babbling away until I press the end button, and then you can see it. So actually, they're all coming out relatively even at the moment, and we've got another 5 people to vote. So if you can get your final ones in, actually, there is a leader. A fairly clear leader now, which I don't think will come as any surprise to anybody again.
Is it the top one?
I'm not going to let you know that until I've closed it. Right, I think we're there now. I think everybody's pretty much voted. So here you go. I'm about to share that one. Alistair, you ruined it for everybody. So yeah. Yes, it is. So that's quite interesting. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody.
It's incredibly interesting because I was going to kind of add, if you take planting, for example, a very kind of historic HTA specification which defines plant stock and the specification of said plant stock. We don't seem to take that approach. And I'm not going to kind of say the the quality of stock is comparable across the board, because we all have our preferred suppliers when it comes to plant stock. But, and don't take this very simply, but an oak tree is an oak tree, and it should be an oak tree wherever you buy said specimen from. We've seen it come across more so now in bedding material, so there is a clear performance specification, there's not a nomination, but that doesn't seem to extend to, you know, paving, furniture and the like, and that's probably leads us into probably the next, or the fourth question, which is how do we change? I haven't got the magic button or the answers, but there's certainly an opinion which can be shared.
I think for us, that's actually leading into the third one, the next one that we'll talk about, sustainability, that you were talking before about comparisons, and are you actually comparing like with like when you are looking to maybe value engineer a product against another one? And I think that is exactly the point. You know, we've been led by other areas of choice and not performance specifications, and I think maybe we have to shift that, certainly for the next discussion point, when you get into sustainability and you're talking about quality and durability and warranties and things like that that are key. You know, how do we sort of shift it away from other, not lesser maybe, but at the moment surely sustainability needs to pretty much take priority over almost anything, but which it doesn't seem to right now. So yeah, some interesting results there, and I think that bottom one as well, actually, poorer result. I mean, that's quite a high result, that people are feeling like the outcome is not great, and it could be better. So yeah, there's some interesting ones there. Thank you. So moving on, I've just mentioned that we were going to discuss sustainability and its impact on value engineering and projects as a whole. And as I was saying, again, shifting away from the cost on day one, and what seems to be coming out of this is that there is very much this emphasis on that price at the time you're building. So shifting towards whole life cost, and how do we start to consider carbon in this? How do we bring in the consideration of replacement and maintenance costs? And you talked before to us, Alistair, about some interesting scenarios where you're talking about maintenance of structures that have a softwood underbelly, if you like, but the nice visible bits are all hardwood, highly durable hardwood. So can you give us some indication of that, because it just doesn't tally at the moment, does it?
So I'm of the opinion that value engineering doesn't mean lower cost, certainly lower capital cost. We take the approach that as contractors we should be offering clients a holistic review of the full life cost of a certain asset that's being built or installed, and that extends to, you know, the maintenance. And I've kind of floated the question earlier, which I'm sure will feature, you know, how long are we designing these schemes for? When do we redecorate a garden? When does a public realm scheme reach its end life? I mean, I haven't been around for too long to see projects come back round again.
I have.
But, you know, we're seeing that, you know, are we designing, building, maintaining for 20 years before a scheme is refreshed? But yes, we get instances whereby timber structures have a softwood superstructure, and then the bit you see is the glossy, very durable hardwood. Now, that makes no sense. We go back with a buildability observation, which says actually you'd be better off, wouldn't you, by having a hardwood superstructure, which would reduce the ongoing or long-term management costs. And essentially that's a higher capital cost. So there's a cost increase, but yet there is a perhaps a more sustainable, a longer outcome, lower maintenance costs and the like, which should be built into that value engineering solution.
And do you think there realistically is any or very much consideration of the ongoing maintenance at that point in time when you're looking at weighing up these options? Or is it really very much more about capital? And I'm not, and again, I'm not blaming you or saying you particularly, but
I think there are huge constraints on budgets, and I'm not wanting to get into the debate of sometimes what VE means, but I often find it's do more for less. That is often the question that is ultimately being asked. I'm seeing a lot more short-term products being specified, and I mean that, you know, hard landscape products that are perhaps not best suited to the environment they're being placed. Lots of use of self-binding gravels, which, you know, ongoing maintenance liability if you manage that product correctly. You've got regular top up, you've got wetting, rolling, and the like. The product is wind blown, it gets taken away by foot traffic. So there is a huge burden on maintenance pot ongoing. And, you know, simple exercise we carried out, you know, the life cost of a self-binding gravel against a recycled concrete product that can be sourced locally, over the course of 5 years you don't see a benefit, but 10 plus you see a huge benefit. You know, the total life cost is less as a result. So that whole process needs to be embedded in the design process from the beginning, and, you know, really understand and learn from the lessons that we can share on projects that are running now or have run in the last kind of 10 years.
I get the impression that's what we need to do more than anything, actually, just share our knowledge. You know, yours, from what you're saying, Wayne's through all of Barley's members, you know, suppliers that have specialist technical knowledge about all the different aspects that they manufacture and supply. You know, maybe there's not enough of that. I know we've got a sort of framework with CPDs and those sorts of opportunities, but we just don't get the opportunity to really get into the nitty gritty like this very often, do we? And I think that's the key.
Yeah, sorry, Romy. I think
no, I was going to bring you in, Wayne. Yeah,
I was just going to say, I think from Barley's perspective, that's what we're about. We're about landscape industries, and it's about bringing different parts of the industry together. So I think, you know, we've been working with the suppliers in the industry for some time now to try and highlight the moves that they're making in terms of their sustainability aspects and what they're doing to push that forward and push that whole agenda on sustainability forward. I think more and more now people are much more aware of climate emergency. You know, we're kind of not necessarily drifting off into that, but it plays a huge part, I think, in people's awareness and understanding. And I think from our perspective, it's about making sure that our members are also looking at that moving forward, no matter what the product is what they're doing with it and how they can improve it moving forward. I think the other aspect, I was just to kind of pick up on this maintenance issue. I think maintenance is quite wide, and we were discussing maintenance the other week on another session, just in relation to the maintenance sector within landscaping. But I think, you know, that whole aspect, as Alistair's already referred to, plays a huge part, and it's a bit of a, I suppose it's a bit of a hot topic of mine. Is, you know, I very often talk about forward procurement and forward contracting, but actually that forward procurement and contracting for me also should be including the maintenance. I think very often we see schemes that are absolutely fantastic. You can still question whether they're ultimately sustainable longer term, but I think, you know, absolutely beautiful schemes, but then have no maintenance whatsoever in certain cases in order to maintain those structures and those landscape schemes moving forward. And that's the real downside of our industry. And it's something that I've been pushing forward in government meetings, industry meetings, you name it, anywhere I get the opportunity, like now, is basically I'll be pushing that message forward. And I'm hopeful that someone somewhere someday will start to listen. But I think that's hugely important. I think as we move forward, I think the maintenance aspect plays a huge part. And I think also just how, you know, Alistair's kind of talked about lifespan, and I think what we're also seeing is a slight change in expectations on behalf of clients as to what their green infrastructure space, their landscape space should be for and look like. Particularly, I think that's highlighted in this last 7 months or so because of COVID. People are questioning what they're doing with their green space and how they want it to look and move forward. And whether that's in the public domain or private, I think people are beginning to start to think about that much more carefully. And I think aspects of maintenance, therefore, should play an even bigger role in that, because I think styles and things may change over time. You know, what we did 20 years ago may not be appropriate for today, and what we're doing today may not be appropriate for 20 years' time. And I think that's the real key, I think, in terms of moving forward as to how we're planning that process and advising clients and working with others in the industry.
And we talked about a while back now the need for something like a green guide to specification to be expanded across materials that would give you embodied carbon, but in use carbon. And I think the Landscape Institute's also very keen to develop something like that database. And I think probably, I mean, I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts, but if you let us know whether that feels like one of the areas that you just don't have enough knowledge of at the moment. You know, it's okay saying we should do better and we can do better and you need to make the right choices, but do people have those choices and that technical knowledge and the technical specifications that we were talking about earlier? You know, where are the gaps, which maybe is what we come on to for the final round of conversation. I've got
just,
yeah, sure. No, sure.
The point that Wayne made about maintenance. If you just take, for instance, grasswoods, you could have a project which specifies 3 or 4 different types of grasswood, which would all need a completely different piece of kit to manage it, which increases the cost of management, creates inefficiencies because you're not fully utilising that asset during the management and maintenance of the asset. And I think there is a big disconnect between the decisions made. Every line on a drawing or in a design scheme represents the person that's got to build it, the person that's got to maintain it at the end. And there needs to be that bringing together of thinking beyond what does it look like at practical completion or end of defects, but what does this scheme look like in 5 years time, 10 years time, 15 years time, and see how robust all of the decisions are in the project's life.
I think that is very true, and to allow flexibility, as Wayne was saying, we don't know what things will look like in 20 years. I mean, climate change and the climate emergencies brought more of that than ever before. We mitigation of what's coming next.
Well, I think even COVID and lockdown,
yes,
and perhaps even this sudden surgence of relaxed mowing regimes has changed it over the course of 6 months. I'm sure plants will look very differently at grass management, verge management, and they won't be cut to within an inch of their life. And we will be looking at diversifying equipment to support that.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? Lots of changes coming, I think, probably. So we've got a couple more questions here that I'll launch for you. Again, multiple choice, if you could take part. So do you think in your experience that value engineering takes account of sustainable aspects and issues? Oh, okay. So we've got a no very strongly from somebody. And then the second question, which is what you were talking about just now, really, Alistair, is what is the design life of the average commercial landscape project? I think that's mostly what we're talking about. Obviously, domestic could be slightly different. But if you could just give us some guidance there, that would be really interesting. And they are shifting around. We've got another 6 or 7 people to go. If you could fill that out. Are you going to hazard another guess, Alistair, as to the winner?
I guess it depends how many capability Browns are in the room.
Well, yes, it's hard to tell from our point of view. In fact, it's hard to tell from everyone's point of view, isn't it? I think we're pretty much there now, so I'll close that and share that for you. The first one is fairly resounding. There you go. So 88% of people don't feel that the impact on sustainability is accounted for, which again, I guess is not much of a surprise to many of us. And that's quite interesting, the design life there. So yeah, not much in it actually. Maybe I could have changed the bands on that. I suspect
I think there's perhaps a combination between infrastructure projects, which of course, shelter belt planting, woodlands, etc., would have 50 plus against your parks restoration, public realm scheme that may have a shorter life. But perhaps it's a question, it's an open question really. With regards to that, no, we've got a situation whereby I don't think specifiers really understand the manufacturing process and the the full carbon impact of a decision to specify one thing over another. Steel fabrication is one big element that we are often faced, have challenges with, but you can find a local steel fabricator and instantly have a huge benefit in terms of impact of the scheme in terms of carbon. It won't affect quality, and that's something that perhaps needs to be looked at.
I think we'll come on to shortly, how we can do better and what decisions we might make that would be different to the ones we make today. I mean, my understanding, I'm not sure if it's entirely true, is that the average urban regeneration project runs every sort of 15 to 20 years. So if you look at a city centre that's looking very kind of 80s, that's well overdue a facelift. And it comes back to fashions. We did talk about you see certain colours and you see certain products. So I think there's a design life, and there's also this sort of fashion as well, isn't there, which you have to take some account of, tracking through certain materials. So that's a tricky one, because the longer you're supplying for, is it going to look really dated, and how can you be flexible enough to just uplift certain things or change, as you were saying, the maintenance methods maybe. So I think we have got to think about that as well into the future if we're going to do better. So we've got the last section and question, which is, I guess, maybe almost the most important. How can we do this better? It's okay talking about all the issues and all the problems that we're aware of, but what can we do to make that a lot better? So I don't know, do you want to start, Wayne, with some of your views from members and what they've been saying? I know we discussed before the sort of forward procurement, utilising expertise that's available through the supply chains that people are involved in. And I think another slightly thorny one was specifiers addressing buildability better, which you've alluded to, Alistair, as already.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, as I say, it kind of goes across the whole piece, really. I think, Alistair's touched on types of machinery, etc., used for different swards of grass. That's just one aspect of the types of things that we're seeing. And through the National Contractors Forum within Barley, we're at the process now where we're trying to get together with manufacturers and suppliers in the industry to talk about making sure that the machinery, the equipment that they manufacture and sell actually suits the needs of the end user, i.e. those people in the landscape industry. We know that that's not going to be a short-term thing. It's going to take probably 10 to 15 years to make any kind of impact on that. But actually, given what Alistair was saying, and given the other aspects of what we're saying about how the industry's changing, how landscapes are changing, I suppose what we're asking them to do is to perhaps react to those requirements a little bit quicker. If their research and development program is a 10 to 15 year process in order to make changes on those machines, etc., then ultimately, our landscapes could be changing in that same time, as we've just talked about. So, are those machines that they're producing for 15 years' time now suitable for the job that they've got in hand? I think other aspects for me and for our members is, as I said earlier on, it's about getting involved in the process at a much earlier stage, so that those, the various parties, if you like, in a landscape scheme project come together, talk with each other, advise each other. I think that the biggest aspect that a contractor will bring to it is the construction knowledge on whether things will work or not, or whether things can be value engineered in those kind of examples that I gave you earlier. I think if you look at some poor examples, we've had some examples about installation of irrigation on a rooftop to water the artificial grass that's on the rooftop. Omission of an irrigation system just to save money in the long run, or does it, as the question may be asked. Clients asking if lighting that can be quoted for can be done for less. So, this is a 10 million house build project, but quibbling over £2,000 for lights for example, within their garden. So there's a whole range of things that contractors can be involved in and advise on from that sort of build process, excuse me. And I think, you know, this whole thing about reducing soil depths, reducing mulch depths, less maintenance carried out, all of those kind of things can be put to bed much earlier rather than at the end of the project. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. It's about bringing those people together within the project realms and making sure that they're talking to each other, working with each other and trying to find the right solutions, which could be very different from one project to another, but trying to find the right solutions that work for both the client and also the scheme that's involved.
I think so. I mean, I think that's what we're trying to set up here, opportunities to talk. I mean, this is by no means a dig directly at contractors, but we find it very, very hard to engage with them. And I suppose it comes back to what Alistair was saying earlier about just the time. You know, we try and offer CPDs, we try and have conversations, but there's just never seemingly an opportunity. It's never the right time. And we are all busy people, so you know you understand that, but it makes it really difficult. I don't know what the answer to that is, how you engage meaningfully, and when, I suppose.
Yeah, it is a difficult question to answer, actually, because as Alistair's already pointed out, time is of the essence on these projects, and that's how it sits at the moment. It's a mindset change. There's an awareness aspect, an educational aspect to this in terms of all parties understanding the reason and the need for doing that. But also on the basis that, sorry, just been put off because somebody's just knocked at the door. But the problems are working at home.
Yes.
But I think, you know, from that perspective, it's just got to be looked at. And I think it's not going to change overnight by any stretch of the imagination. But I think it's about providing those opportunities. And I think, you know, if we look at the work that we've been doing with the Landscape Institute over the last maybe even 3 or 4 years, probably the last 2 more so, that opportunity becomes greater because actually we've now got, you know, our membership talking with the LI's membership, and not only the members talking, but also, you know, in the staffing of both organisations doing much more together, you know, having an opinion on what each other is doing, working on projects together. So that, I think, is the start of this in terms of how we take this forward. I think we've got to react as an industry to make sure that we're then saying to our clients, to main contractors, to architects, etc., this is the way we operate, actually. And, you know, landscape architects may be saying, well, we've got to bring the contractor in at this point. Contractors be advising the same thing to their clients. You know, in terms of garden designers, if it's a domestic garden, etc., you know, we've got to bring these people in at this stage to provide you with the best possible advice that we can give you. And I think that's part of the key to how we move this forward. It is about talking, it is about working together, but it's about how we can bring people together. And I know that contractors can be difficult to get hold of because they're so busy out there doing the job. And that's
in the
part
rain.
of the issue. So, but that's part of the awareness and that's part of the education that hopefully we can help with as we move forward as well, in terms of making sure that message gets out there and show the benefits. I think if we ran some case studies and show the benefits of how that can really benefit both, well, all parties, I suppose, you know, the contractor, the designer, landscape architects, clients, you know, you name them, and a few case studies showing the benefit of being able to do that. I think likewise, we've got a bigger issue on our hands with public procured projects, because I think there is a government issue for them to understand even better as to how they can be better tendered and better contracted. And again, we come back to that forward procurement, forward contracting message that I said earlier. So
yeah, planning.
Sorry,
and
I'll shut up now.
No, one last question, and then I'm going to say the same to Alistair. Is there I'm just thinking in all of this, is there a place for BIM where this information that we all need and the forward planning and the costing that runs through and all of the benefits that we've talked about around BIM for, well, I've been talking about them for about 10 years now, unbelievably, you know, is there still a place for that if we can ever get to there? Do you see that sort of delivery of information being key?
My personal opinion is yes, because I think the benefits of BIM are not just about the here and now, it's about historical information in the future. And that could be really powerful. You know, if you look at it even from a research and development perspective, you know, how long did products last in a particular environment, all of those kind of things that we've already talked about today. So I think BIM can and should play a large part in what we do moving forward. Absolutely.
Alistair, do you see it the same way? Thanks, Wayne.
Well, but BIM definitely, because it looks forward as well as thinks about the current. I did put my soapbox away for this question.
Okay.
Because I think there's a huge thing about buildability and contractors' doors being open, and I don't want to create a rod for my back, but refreshingly, I suppose in the last couple of months where perhaps people have got a bit more time to talk, we've been engaged in simply giving some sensible advice to, you know, projects in maintenance stage, in you know, design stage, whereby consultant teams want a bit of you know, how would you manage that, or what considerations do I need to make in terms of this parking use. One such example is, you know, the quantity and number of bins to be provided. Well, we all know that if you go down the route of a 60 or 100 litre bin, it will not perform in the summer. So how do you adapt particular areas or path widths so that they can accommodate an €1,100 bin, because that will be the reality of it, to prevent you know, the images we see all over social media of rubbish being piled around bins. I kind of think, how do we do it better? There are all sorts of reasons perhaps why contractors aren't involved early on, you know, not to mention perhaps conflict in a public procurement exercise. But one of the things that we've had huge success with, certainly most recently, is a project review. That's when you've got everybody in the room. Let's not think about getting the project over the line, having that PC meeting, creating a snag list. Let's have an honest conversation about the lessons learned from that project delivery. You know, what was good about the design, what didn't quite work, what was good about the contractor's performance in terms of delivery. A lot of work is done below ground. The public don't see it. That's where a huge amount of the cost is. You know, simple things on projects like advanced investigation that's actually proportionate to the amount of work you're doing. Simple CBR testing in situ to determine whether sub-bases can be reused. All of those things mean that you can divert budget to the things that are really important, the things that people see, the things you want to perform for longer, the things that perhaps could be reused in future schemes. Those are all the aspects of you know, perhaps how we could do things better.
And have you thought about, or do you offer CPDs? It just made me wonder when you said you were giving advice. I mean, is that something that as a business maybe you could or would do from your point of view?
I think there's certainly a case for it. I guess there is the USP we'd like to retain, because that does make us who we are. But you know, we are contributing to many forums out there, and certainly public working groups. We feature quite heavily to try to get involved early and influence and just give some, you know, knowledge to the industry. That's
knowledge
really
sharing. Yeah, you need to be more Scandinavian, Alistair, and just, you know, get it out there. Okay, thank you. We've got the poll then on this section. And then just a couple of questions at the end, which both Wayne and Alistair were quite keen to get some feedback on. So we're nearing the end. So if you do have questions, we'll probably get about 5 minutes where we can open the floor. But if you're happy to have a look at this and see what you think is important in terms of doing better and bringing about a better outcome, then please do start to fill those. And again, it's multiple choice, so it's not just one of those. We're starting to see a few coming through. Thank you, by the way. I think we may have had one person come and go, but everybody's sticking it out so far. So thank you to everyone for your time. We're about halfway through now with the answers, I think, and they're fairly evenly spread at the moment. So we need those last few to make a bit of a difference, I think. 5 people more, if you haven't nodded off. Right, I think I'll draw it to close. Right, thank you. A couple of last minute ones. Okay, we'll go for this and I'll share the results with you. So, collaboration, which is always reassuring, I think, when that's kind of what you're
We all want to
thinking.
do it.
I know, and we haven't been doing it for 25 years or more. I don't know what the answer to that one is. I really don't. But yeah, it seems loud and clear, doesn't it?
Interesting, the one that scored lowest, speaking to many suppliers recently, because there is this kind of lead-driven aspect. I know a number of them are well advanced in terms of ensuring that key components are the same, regardless of what bench you've got or bin you've got, so that the supply chain lead times can be reduced. There's more cost efficiencies in the manufacturing.
Yeah.
So that again, you can almost spend the money on the bit that you see and get greater efficiencies.
Yes, and actually that is an important one, maybe not from a designer's point of view, the first at top of the list, but lead time we know is absolutely critical. I think our production manager is immensely concerned because he's been told that our new factory in 18 months time or whenever it's up and running, then our lead time could be brought down to 2 weeks. And he won't talk to anybody about it at the moment, but that's what we're being told. So, I mean, there is a recognition that it is really important. Okay, just a couple more questions then to round this off. We're about 7 minutes away. But these, if you would give us some answers, would be great. And then we'll just see if anybody has any questions or wants to drop anything into chat. So who do you think usually introduces value engineering on a project that you're working on? That's coming out fairly clearly at the moment, but a few more people to vote. Yeah, 3, 2, 1. One more person. One person hasn't voted, I think. It's fairly clear anyway, so I'll move it on. Main contractor. So that's who people are seeing more than anybody bringing that in. Which, I don't know, maybe that is surprising. You sort of think it's the client pushing, but actually maybe not, or maybe we don't get the full story. I don't know. But yeah, there's some really interesting aspects that have come out of that. Thank you. And that's it for the polling, and that's it really for our conversation. Is there anything you'd like to say in addition, Wayne or Alistair, just to sort of round things off? And what should we do? What might we do next, rather than just leave this here?
So I think from my perspective, I think it's about, we talked about, again, climate emergency has, if you like, provided a unique opportunity for everyone to redefine what matters. And I think that's the sort of bigger agenda conversation to be had. But I think a lot of what we need to do is provide further opportunities for that discussion to take place. It may well be that between Barley and the LI, we can start that discussion off as to how we take that further forward, how we take it out to both membership realms and then beyond. I think I was quite surprised on that last poll, actually, just to see that architects didn't appear in there at all, but that just might be those on the call today, excuse me. But I think the range of answers that we tend to get back from contractors, architects do tend to play a fairly big part in that role, particularly in sort of either private commercial or public realm contracts, that type of thing. But I think, if we can be the embryo, so to speak, between the two organisations initially, kind of almost speaking on behalf of the LI, but I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't necessarily say no on the back of that. Have those discussions and look at how we can then get that information out and where it needs to get to. I know the LI has very close links with the likes of Reba and Rix and things like that as well. And I think that's an important part to play. There is a Procurement Officers Association, that we can get out to and talk to for some of the public and particularly the local authority contracts, things like that, for example. So I think there's different ways of taking this forward, and I think it is a communication piece, and I think it's an education piece, without a shadow of a doubt. But we've got to have the right message, and as I say, perhaps we need a bit of time to develop some case studies to prove that point.
I think that's a really good point. And I think if we focus on sustainability and the need for, to be net zero at some point in the not too distant future, then actually that has to focus all of us more than anything, maybe. Alistair, have you got any final thoughts?
Well, whole life cost, consider it. Be open-minded. It's not about cost reduction. Sometimes you're getting it or getting the suggestions primarily out of building a better product, building a better long-term product, trying to offset some of the risk, particularly program risk, which I've alluded to. But biggest plea is for a bit more time. Give us the time to do the right things and ultimately input where we feel it's beneficial. But also then I think the marketplace will benefit hugely from this, having to constrain. The most important bit, actually, we're talking about building something that should last into its management. We're making an investment in landscape and public realm, and often the most important phase is just squeezed for all sorts of different reasons. So that's a plea more than an instatement. But
yeah, I think that makes a really good point. And I think everybody feels they're squeezed at some point in this process. As I said earlier, I think, the same goes for some reason. Suppliers would say the same often. The designers would say the same often. I don't know why, but it does seem to often go that way, doesn't it? So perhaps maybe we all push back.
5 different rabbits that need to be pulled out of the hat. We just need to focus our efforts on one.
Yeah, maybe that's it. And we need to all push back and say, actually, this isn't viable. This isn't getting you the best outcome. We need to do things differently. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to have a think about that. But I'm aware we've got 1 minute to go, so I don't want to keep people any longer than we need to, because I know everybody is very busy and has very little time. So thank you very much again for your time and joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed it and felt it's been worthwhile. Thanks very much, Alistair and Wayne, for your input. It's been really interesting, and I think it's brought a good sort of balanced view. And please, anybody who has got queries or questions, do get in touch. We can administer that, and if you'd like to explore anything further with any of us, please do just make contact. If you've missed our previous sessions, I'll be sending out links to those. We have all 3 of them now live, up and running. I think we might have something in the chat. I'll just double check. Oh, we're getting a few thank yous. Yeah, people saying thank you very much. Thank you to you. We've got a couple of upcoming ones planned next month. We're going to shift focus completely, talking to 3 business founders, business leaders, directors of companies, not all landscape companies. One's already a B Corp, 2 are trying to be. So there's again a sort of sustainable thread through them. And I think that will be a really interesting discussion on the challenges they faced setting up and running their businesses, and especially during these times. So I think that's potentially something for everybody. It doesn't really matter what your particular background or company is. It's just a look at how you do things properly and create decent work for the people you work with, and that ties into SDG number 8, as you can see there. And then we have another one just before Christmas, which oops, sorry, lost it completely. Let me just get this back up again. Sorry about that. Are you now seeing that? I'm not sure if it's sharing.
Yeah, it's up.
Sorry. And then another one just before Christmas on back to sustainable cities and communities, which we do talk about quite a bit. But that one's going to be a focus with Jane Findlay on healthy landscapes and Marie Burns on inclusive landscapes. And it's going to be really much more about equitable landscapes as a whole and a discussion around those areas. So please do join us for those if you can, and we'll be sending out more information on those. And obviously our CPDs are always there, and if anything from today is of interest in terms of sustainability or materials particularly, then do get in touch. So thanks again, everybody, Alistair and Wayne particularly, also Matt and Jack who are in the background hidden, helping with various functions, and have a great weekend, everybody. Halloween tomorrow, so enjoy the pumpkins. Okay, thanks for now.
Thanks, Remy. Thanks all.
All
Thank
right,
you.
bye.